Hey, good morning, everybody. This is People of Substance by LemonSkies. I'm your host, Olga Woltman, and today's a treat. I have not one but two guests, Scott Rosenkrans and Nathan Chappell, co-authors of a book that literally is coming out in May of this year, Nonprofit AI, co-founders of Fundraising AI. So, surprise, surprise, we'll be talking about a lot of artificial intelligence questions. So please say hi.
Hi, happy to be on here. Happy to talk to you and happy to talk about AI.
Excellent.
Scott's excited. It's the first time he's been called a person of substance. So, it's
First
great to
time
be
in
here, Olga.
41
Yeah,
years.
right,
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
you're going to put
Probably
that on
the
your LinkedIn
last.
now.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does this collaboration work? I'm getting a good vibe here.
Well, actually, Scott and I met, I think 2017, right, Scott?
Yeah, 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, we worked together on our first AI model back then, a machine learning model predicting gratitude, and it was love at first sight, I think. So we worked together early on. He came from a background of prospect development. I came from a background more of fundraising leadership, and kind of synced up in the middle. And so it's kind of crazy to think that's been like 10 years almost ish. Not almost. I'm exaggerating. So, but 8
Round up.
years. It feels like 10, but 8 years of doing this stuff together, and day to day we work really closely together. And then I think at a certain point, we were talking about this stuff so much that we hit record and then started our own podcast, Fundraising AI podcast. And then we were talking about stuff so much that we just decided to write a book together. So, it's been a fun journey.
So I have a lot of questions about the book. Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
We complement each other well. I mean, we're both early adopters. He's very visionary. I'm very tactical. So we sometimes approach the same topic from two different angles. Also a leader in nonprofits, and I've been a prospect researcher, kind of like from the bottom up. So just different perspectives, but all it comes together well.
So let me ask you this. You started talking about artificial intelligence and AI before ChatGPT era, right? So I think ChatGPT sort of put it at everybody's fingertips, and then suddenly everybody is talking about AI, but what they're really talking about is generative AI. What kind of set you on that path?
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
So I again started as a prospect researcher. I was sitting in a lot of data, right? Trying to figure out obviously how the organization would identify the right people. And then throughout my time at the organization I started working at, I was there for 3 years. By the end, I was overseeing all the data for a $150 million capital campaign. And then that, like many nonprofits, they were not as efficient with their data as they probably should have been. So I read Josh Burkle's his book on fundraising analytics. That resonated with me because I used that software that he references in my grad school days. So I started building predictive models and just kind of seeing like we could do more with the data that's there, but it was still very limited. Nathan had a different path, but when we converged, he was just much more elevated predictive model. So I was already aligned there. It just didn't have the capability to test out machine learning like he did. And so it resonated immediately. It synced immediately, and then we've just been, kind of on this journey. But Nathan,
Yeah. I mean, my work really started out of frustration. I mean, to be honest. So I spent 20 years leading nonprofits, and essentially while we were raising more money every year, we were raising it from less people. And I remember this one day specifically where I had a PhD computer scientist on my team, and we had this conversation, which I regret now and ever since, but we had this conversation about building a better mousetrap. And I remember distinctly like using those words, referring to donors, of course, as the mice. And so, it really took me back because, I think about that, and then I had this reflection of like, how did we get here? Like, how did we get to this point that we're sitting around a table in this professionalized office with 200 employees, raising a lot of money and talking about donors as mice? And it was really a reflection of the type of technology that we were using. So we were building every year new models, so new regression models over and over and over again. 20 years of my career was trying to build this better mousetrap. And then, it didn't take much to look across the aisle at Netflix and Amazon and others who were using machine learning and deep learning, doing this totally different. They were building these models that were highly intuitive, that never had to be rebuilt, that could just continue to learn and grow. And I love that idea because it took me a while to recognize that like we were on this vicious path of every year creating a new model, new model, starting over from scratch, and data hygiene, and all the things that were limiting our success. And so machine learning just presented itself as this like perfect situation where we could get away from that build a better mousetrap and then have a model that honestly served as like this, partner of ours to help provide guidance. So that's what started, our work was in the machine learning, deep learning, and it was super nerdy. I mean, Scott and I, we had to cut our teeth with data scientists who would question us on like F1 scores and AUCs and all these like crazy, the terms that you knew if a data scientist actually knew their thing. And now it's changed because back then there were not a lot of AI experts. There were, and AI experts were essentially data scientists. And then to your point, ChatGPT came out November 2022. And everyone's an AI expert now. And so it makes us cringe a bit because we're like, well, you didn't really do the hard work, but it's just so different because AI is so much more accessible now.
So
now we have people asking us about hallucinations of our
hallucinations
and hallucinations and token size of our predictive models, which obviously is not applicable.
Right.
Yeah. So I have a lot more questions on AI specifically, but before we get to that, Nathan, I got to know you shortly after you wrote The Generosity Crisis, your first book, or maybe it's not your first.
Yeah, it is.
It was your first, okay. And that was written in 2022, just sort of in the midst of pandemic. We're just starting to climb our way out of it. And here we are, 2025. Looking back, is there anything that has changed?
Yeah, not for the better. It's interesting, to tie that in with AI. In fact, our book came out November 17th. ChatGPT came out November 22nd. So, we really definitively say it's the last book only written by humans. So it literally was probably one of the last books that didn't have any AI in it at all. But we talked about AI and being a scalable solution. The Generosity Crisis was really a prediction of what would happen if we continued doing transactional fundraising. And so we projected in the future, and I know you know this because you've read it, but the first 100 pages are pretty depressing. And we heard that from a lot of people like, oh my God, like, why didn't you tell me to have a box of cookies next to me when I was reading this thing? And, the first 100 pages are a dystopian future, essentially what we thought was dystopian future that would have been 10, 15 years away, where NIH funding was going to dry up and hours of nonprofits would have to be shortened or nonprofits would be closing, like a zoo. We gave all these different examples and stories of what could happen, and what we really predicted would be a slow kind of steady decline of 10, 15, 20 years if we didn't take action. And of course, 2025 has been a very turbulent year, and many of our predictions, in fact, we just published a compendium a 36-page update where we compare, this is what we predicted to this is what has happened. We just published that for free 2 weeks ago because a lot of our predictions that we thought would be 15 years away have actually happened in the first 3 months of this year, almost to a T. So it's actually kind of eerie in that sense. But the call to action is the same. In either case, the call to action is let's move away from transactional fundraising and let's focus on, building authentic community and personalization, and then leveraging technology, which is a theme of the book, those kind of three things to reinvent or reimagine what generosity could look like.
Right. No, a lot has changed in that. If I recall correctly, there's a case study in your book about Teslas and people thinking that's a way to contribute to environment. So,
well, I mean, Elon says it is. So, I mean, and these are, his words, and not to be divisive, but it's hard not to be divisive with Elon these days. I mean, he was interviewed by Chris Anderson from TED Talk, and he, in this hour-long interview, said that and named every one of his companies as being philanthropy. And because the word philanthropy means for the love of humankind, Tesla, of course, is, good for the environment, and, going to Mars is going to save the human race and all these things. So by definition, in his terms, his companies are philanthropy. Then it calls the question, if I buy a Tesla, does that mean I'm a philanthropist? And when I posed that online, after that, it was the most commented LinkedIn post I've still had to date. But it was 50% of the people said, yes, of course you're a philanthropist. Like philanthropy has nothing to do with a tax status. It's not, philanthropy and nonprofits are not synonymous. And the other half said this was sacrilegious and how dare me to even ask the question. And we know which side, are the nonprofit professionals in there. But all to say is that it's a new world and there's a lot more options to express generosity than just through a nonprofit.
So now that you've written the second book, Nonprofit AI, first of all, you co-wrote this book. So Scott, how does collaboration work? How do you co-write it? Do you go back and forth with drafts? Do you split up kind of the writing parts? Do you argue and use a whiteboard? Like, how does the creative process of it works?
Yeah, well, Nathan and I always argue, so that's just par for the course. But we also had a co-writer. I mean, we were using generative AI to write with us, right? Like we came up with the outline, like we've been doing this work for so long. We've worked with so many nonprofits. We see where AI adoption fails, right? And whether it's technical, whether it's cultural, whatever it is. So we knew the challenges we wanted to address and the topics we wanted to focus on. But generative AI was helpful in formulating those thoughts, fleshing them out, kind of choosing better words, better analogies. I'd never written a book. Nathan co-wrote the first book with Brian Crimmins, but again, bringing in generative AI was a new experience for him as well. But like I mentioned earlier, we're kind of two sides of the same coin, right? So we split up the book in what would be more natural. He takes some of the first chapters, which are more like, how do we get here? Why does it matter? Like, what does this all mean? I took the middle section, which is tactical, like if you're in, prospect research or fundraising, how to use it. If you're in operations, how to use it. If you're in HR, how to use it. And then we split up the third section of like frameworks you need to follow so that you can abide by, responsible, beneficial use of AI, resources, glossary. It's really when we went about writing the book, we wanted to address any single challenge that would prevent someone from being further down the path of AI adoption, knowing that it is a constant journey, it's never a destination, and with the intent that they read it, they take actionable steps, and then a couple months later, they come back and read it again from a different perspective, and then can move ahead as a result.
So it's hands-on kind of guide, not just I learned about it, but here's how I put it to work.
Exactly. Kind of like a reference manual almost. You don't have to read it front to back. You can look at the chapter list and see which resonates with you and then start there.
So let me ask you this. Were there any surprises for you yourself as authors along the way? Because as you start exploring and digging into the topic, certain things come out that you maybe did not expect. Were there any moments like that along the way?
I mean, I think we were, it was a really interesting test for us in time because we were watching the technology unfold itself while we were writing the book, so the whole process took somewhere around 10 months or something like that when we, the publisher asked if we would write the book and agreed. And of course, at the time where it's like ChatGPT and Claude and others, and even our publisher had their own AI tool, could barely put together, a couple pages, like pretty good at an 800-word essay, but not a chapter that would be cohesive with other chapters. So, while we're using AI, and of course, we decided in the beginning we wanted to use AI because we'd be complete hypocrites if we wrote a book called Nonprofit AI and didn't use AI. But we also fully disclosed our use of AI. So the first page of the book it's actually a beautiful preamble about how we use AI as a thought partner and creative partner and all these. And not surprising, that preamble is written by ChatGPT. It actually did such a good job when it wrote this. I gave it to Scott and I'm like, Scott, if we edit this, we're going to make it worse. Like it actually was so good because it had worked with us for 10 months on all these different things. And of course we used all of our privacy settings and we edited everything. And but I think the surprising part was, or not surprising, but fun part was watching the technology get better and better and what's called the token window. The token window is how much memory essentially a modern AI, generative AI tool can use before it gets confused. That was really narrow at the beginning, but at the end, it still can't write a book. But my bet is that a year from now, that an AI will be able to write a book. You'll wake up in the morning, Olga, and you'll be like, you know what? I had this amazing dream about this book and it was so clear. And then you could describe it to your AI with your voice for say 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And then it can literally produce an entire book based on that. We're not near there yet, but we're like not far from there either because of the exponential pace that the technology grows. So it was really fun to see that. And then of course our publisher didn't know what to do with us because they're like, well, is this like, what's copyrightable? In fact, the copyright laws were only um, basically formalized a few weeks ago. So like during the process, it was like, well, we didn't know, can prompts be copyrighted? Now they can. Can AI generated content be copyrighted? It can, but only if it's edited. And so we fall obviously all the way in line with that because human touches throughout the entire book all the way through. But during the book, we didn't know that. And the publisher didn't know that. So it led to like a lot of these weird, cool conversations that in future years won't even happen.
So it's kind of like flying and building plane at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when we think about nonprofits and how they use AI, so first of all, I think I've heard both of you speak to who's the type of person that will succeed in this AI supported or AI partnered world. What type of employees should we be looking for that are capable of learning tools very quickly and employing them in smart ways?
I mean, Nathan talks about this often, especially in a new keynote, but it's less about your hard skills. It's less about the role. It's more about how comfortable are you in the gray, right? And being curious and willing to fail. Like try something, not knowing if it's going to work, but not knowing if it's going to succeed. Like fail either. You have to test it out and iterate and go back and be willing to collaborate with others to just learn. Like this is not a static technology. It is not done today. It's not finished. So no matter how good you get, there's always room to grow, and there's always ways to learn from other people who are doing even complete different tasks, but
Yeah.
their thought process of how they got to using AI to help them.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely winners and losers in the AI arms race, right? I mean, the winners and losers, they'll be defined by those that do their work better, faster, and at the end be happier. And that's, it's just proven through a new study that Procter and Gamble did with Harvard Business School. I mean, it's very well documented that people that use AI, even on their own, tend to perform almost as well as teams that are not using AI. So, it's just a very different process. But it's really, I think, because of Scott and my work from 2017 till now, where we've seen so many organizations succeed and so many fail, and probably more fail than succeed, and realize that it had nothing to do with their data or their models, and it had everything to do with their people and culture. And when we really distill down the differences between that people and culture, it comes down to literally two words. And the two words that we saw with organizations that succeeded were what if. And, and Scott likes to tell people, take a Post-it note and write on there, how can AI help? Put that on your screen, and that create that AI mindset and that orientation that anytime you're going to do a task more than once, you're like, look at that Post-it note. How can AI help? It's really asking the question, what if, what if, what if, what if AI could help me do this thing? And that really comes down to curiosity. And so, the winners and losers are not will not be defined by the people who buy the tool faster or spend more money. It will be the people that are willing to ask questions more than, seek questions more than answers. They will allow their teams to, break things and color outside the lines. They will allow their teams to fail fast. And so, I mean, I truly believe that the difference maker or breaker in this new world will be going back to something that we're all born to do, which is just to explore the world through curiosity. And if we really enable that, and that's a big reversal for a lot of nonprofits. Like I led fundraisers most of my career, and I was like, keep your eyes on your paper, like focus on your KPIs. Like that's what the definition of success looks like. We have to flip the script almost entirely in this world of AI because we have a tool that knows something about everything, and now allow people to lean into that and help increase their curiosity quotient so that they're just have this unquenchable thirst to ask what if. Those are the orgs that I get really excited about. Those are the ones that are going to kick butt in this new world.
Do we have a pipeline of those people? Are we training people to think that way? Or do you feel like that's going to be a scarce resource?
There are definitely people there. I think it's harder for an organization to be there 100%, right? but I'm confident that at every organization there's a, a handful of people, a select few people that are able to take that on. It's just a matter of the voice that they have, and if they're leaning into it and really kind of driving that charge.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would say, this is a big shift, and the shift has happened fast.
Hmm.
One is that everyone knows how to be curious. So this is not a technical solution. This is a human solution. I mean, we're born to experience a world with all of our senses. Like we have to learn, that fire is hot, and, putting a fork in the electrical outlet, is not pleasant, and all these things, right? And so, somehow through life, and there's this book, I don't know if you've ever read it, Olga, it's called The Four Agreements. I think, Scott, you've read it before, right? In like grad school or undergrad. And it basically, people are born on this, like in this, level setting way. Like we're all born the same way, but we're essentially shaped by the experiences around us and the people around us. And a lot of those experiences are kind of narrowing our lens of what's acceptable. And so we become like a fraction of our curiosity than we naturally are. So I think that the non-technical solution is that everyone has the ability to be curious. And with the technology that knows something about everything, and just being curious is like literally the winning recipe. I would hire today, absolutely without any doubt, I would hire a curious generalist over a specialist any day. But 2 years ago, 2 years and 4 months ago, before that, I would have hired the specialist. I would have hired the person that had the right experience, the right degree, and the right whatever. And it's so interesting though, because when Scott and I look at job postings, we just did this for one of our clients the other day. They have a bunch of open positions, and we were just curious one night. We were like talking about this, and we're like, let's look at all their open positions and see how many of them talk about AI. Not one of their positions had the reference to AI except for one position, which was an hourly position. And
Hourly
so,
position, and they had it as like, plus it would help if you could do this, but not a
yeah, it was just
requirement,
like a
not a
nice to
need. It
have.
was like an add-on after knowing how to use Excel.
Yeah. So hiring, Olga, to your point, like hiring needs to look very different. I mean, again, like hiring for AI fluency, and there's tons of studies that show this from AWS and Microsoft show that employees that have AI fluency will actually command higher salaries and, and be more successful in their role. But it just hasn't trickled through to the nonprofit yet. So like
Right.
nonprofits really should like literally go and audit your open positions right now and see how you're prioritizing AI fluency, like literally throughout, as not a nice to have, but like as a requirement.
Mhm.
I like how you described it, fluency, and I also feel compelled to say your comment about fork and the electric outlet. Don't do that.
Yeah, I did my fair share. So,
Yeah. Okay. Well,
It was a key for me. I put a key in the outlet.
so Olga, being, the mom, you had to like put that disclosure there.
I
It's like,
had to
I'm
put
not
that-
endorsing this behavior. Don't try it.
Right.
Even though Nathan says it's good.
Well, let me ask you this. I know, and I'm excited to see what case studies you share in your book, but what are some examples of artificial intelligence used extremely creatively, extremely well, that you think are just standouts?
No, that's good. The you asked the question earlier about what was surprising when we were writing this book. I wanted to answer what was frustrating when writing this book, and research was a big part of it, right? And it was two pieces. One was that, again, without guardrails, ChatGPT and other tools can hallucinate a lot. So oftentimes it would give me case studies that didn't exist and point me to a URL that wasn't actual, right? But
Mhm.
more so, and there's so much, you probably see this, but there's so much out there of blog posts saying how can nonprofits use AI, but they're so generalized, they're not specific. You can use it in marketing, you can use it, like there's nothing actionable, and there's no, that drove me insane. Like, this doesn't tell me, that doesn't move me in any way, it doesn't tell me what to do or next step to take. So I want to make sure when we wrote the book, like, we didn't leave that same, well, now what? Like, that I read all this and I have no more information except like what's possible, but
Mhm.
I don't know what step to take. So that I wanted to account for. The research was challenging. I mean, there are, Microsoft conference, AWS conference, a lot of them have nonprofits talking about really, really interesting use cases on the operation side, right? So that was pretty easy to sift through. But things like HR, things like finance, things like administration, there's not much out there. So
Right.
I had spent a lot of time. I can't think of one. Nathan, anything come to mind on your end? I
I
know I'm
mean,
missing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more now than there have been in the past, but it is frustrating. There was a conference, an AI conference that's coming up in a few months, and they did a call for proposals. And when the conference organizers asked me to review and see if I knew anyone, and every single proposal was from a vendor, every single one, not like 100%. It was just like so disappointing. But we do see the small, scrappy nonprofits like doing really creative things. So the part that gets exciting for me is where the phrase that necessity is the mother of invention. We see people like Dan Kershaw, which is a good friend of ours, and we talk about a lot. And he wasn't a friend, but he started using AI and became a friend. He has a nonprofit called the Furniture Bank that has allowed his organization to level up like 10 levels. Small, scrappy organization, no budget, but I will say totally curious. And he decided to do things different. And so he markets himself different. He's super innovative. He used GPT to like brainstorm all of his things. And he's now attracted money from like IKEA and big institutions because it literally just allowed him as a small, scrappy nonprofit to present himself in a way that competes with a nonprofit that would be way above. So there are lots of those, and not just in the U.S. but around the world, where we're seeing like small, scrappy nonprofits solve for huge hurdles, like in how to increase their education retention and using generative AI, where there's not a lot of rules. You can actually do amazing things. To be honest, I think the organizations that are struggling the most are the biggest ones, the biggest, more bureaucratic ones. They're creating AI subcommittees that have been meeting for a year now, but haven't made any decisions on what tools they can use. But those that have fewer barriers for actually implementing are the ones that are really taking off right now. And there's a lot in the book. I mean, we have a number of great use cases. And to be honest, I know we were just at the AWS Imagine conference. I wish that conference happened a year ago, because there were so many great examples there that didn't exist a year ago. And so I think in the next 12, 24, 36 months, we're going to see a lot more of these really like practical use cases that elevated, the impact and mission and fundraising and all that.
Yeah. So if you had to give one piece of advice to leaders of nonprofit organizations, aside from purchasing the book, which you can buy, I believe, Barnes and Noble, the big enterprise online retailer for books that shall not be named. So everywhere where books are near you, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's one piece of advice. But what piece of advice would you give nonprofit leaders to take back to their organizations to at least begin thinking forward in how to leverage artificial intelligence?
Yeah, one place where I see it fail is that nonprofit leaders will purchase an AI tool and think that they did it, think that it's done, right? Like, we purchased it. That means that everyone's going to buy into it. They're going to start like, I don't need to think about this anymore. There needs to be accountability, buy-in, and the organization needs to know that it is a priority of the leadership that everyone gets involved in this and everyone takes action. So it's not just a one and done. It's again an ongoing process that all parties need to come together for.
I would add, I think most people, and Scott and I we're at the forefront of this a bit more, but I think most people grossly underestimate the tectonic shift that AI will make, or has the potential to make, but will make regardless, on society, on the nonprofit sector, on the private sector. And that can be overwhelming, and that could be where a lot of people get stuck. What we really try to tell people is just to do one thing, and don't start with the tool, but start with the problem. What is one thing in your organization that is inefficient, that really bugs you? And then go back to that what if. Like, what if there's a tool that can do this thing? Because most likely there is. But starting with the problem first, and then starting with a single problem, not all the problems. Start with a single problem, the very narrow focused, and then ask what if, and kind of move from there and move outward. And I mean, I think that's that's the most practical advice. Second, it's a little less sexy, but to be honest, like, nonprofits need to have an AI governance policy. And it's not hard. You can use an AI tool like ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini or whatever, Claude, to be like, hey, here are the values of my organization. Use the website or just paste the values in. Help me create an AI governance policy that aligns with our values. Have that as a framework for how you think about and evaluate AI. And then, figure out where's the low-hanging fruit. Like, what are, some of the issues that you have that really bug you, that are inefficient or not creative enough, or whatever you're trying to solve for, and then go from there.
I kind of love the elegance of have AI write governance about AI. So I kind of love how it comes a full circle.
For sure. It's pretty good at it, to be honest.
Well, it's pretty good at a lot of things. So speaking of being good at things, just for a little bit of fun, as you know, I like to wrap up with something that's a little bit off kilter. And what I want to ask both of you is to share an example that's the most ridiculous, fun, outrageous use of AI. So, for example, writing a communication in Moira Rose's voice, that's something that I've done, and it does really stellar job at that. So what are some ridiculous, fun, outrageous ways that you've seen AI being used?
I'll go first because we're always playing with new things, and there's some that just make your hair stand up. But Mallory Erickson, who is a dear friend of mine. Mallory has this thing, like, she is known for sending the world's longest voice memos, and they're horrible. Like, I have to calendar time. I put time on my calendar to listen to her voice memo. It's like, oh, she sent me a voice memo. I've got to block off 20 minutes. There's an app called Typo, Typpo. I don't know if Scott's played with it yet, but it takes a voice memo and it converts it into a video with any kind of template you want. And it's amazing. Like, I'm actually like, hey, Mallory, blah, blah, blah. And it's just turns it into video. So then I mandate it. I'm like, okay, Mallory, now on forever, the only way you can send me a voice memo is through Typo. So that's just a totally ridiculous one, but it has an absolute direct application to nonprofit. So just cutting through the noise and breaking through the communication barrier. Say a donor, just has a new grandbaby, and it's like, hi, Sue Ann, I just was thinking about you and wanted to wish you, congratulations on your new grandchild, blah, blah. Like, how different is that to receive this beautiful video with flowers and whatever, and your text overlaid in your voice, and versus a text or an email or whatever. I mean, calling is great, right? But if you don't, and you want to break that noise, it's literally free. Like, it's a free tool that's on your phone. It requires nothing. So in my opinion, it resembles how easy and accessible AI can be to absolutely increase personalization at scale.
And Nathan always does a better job of tying things to nonprofits. So this one's maybe not going to land for nonprofits, but on the outrageous side, and Nathan was there. We heard from a guy who wanted to buy a rental property, but didn't really know where to start. So he had ChatGPT as his coach on this whole thing. He's like, here's what I'm looking for. Tell me where to look. Found the location. Tell me who I should use as a realtor. Found the realtor. Tell me how I should go in for negotiating. It gave him the whole range, gave him the whole script. He ended up buying that house at the low end of the range that ChatGPT guided him start to finish, reviewed
in
contracts in Mexico. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of it. It was just, when I heard that, I was like, I need those prompts immediately.
So just to be clear, he intended to be in Mexico, right? Like, he wasn't.
Yeah. He was in Mexico, and he wanted to buy the property. He
Yeah.
didn't know how it worked and how the rules would work and all of that, and literally guided him through and helped him negotiate the price. Like, it actually, start to finish.
It was all through ChatGPT.
So Typo and real estate property.
Right.
Have fun with the AI.
Yeah.
And
both ends of the spectrum.
It's all about the mindset. It's like, when you create an AI first mindset, which, we say it tends to happen with about 10 hours of immersive experience with AI, not 10 prompts, but 10 hours. You'll be anywhere at a shopping mall, looking at a flower or whatever. And all of a sudden your brain will be like, well, AI can help. It's like, you'll just assume it can. And that's the big breakthrough, I think, for most people, because it's a tool that knows something about everything. And just once you recognize that, doors just open up, and all the opportunities open up.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you both. And we'll drop the link for where people can find your book. And thank you for all the work you're doing to keep us honest in how we use artificial intelligence and pushing us forward with exploring new horizons.
Awesome. Thanks, Olga.
Thanks, Olga.